This one's just going to be a quick video to introduce our newest project at the labs, Depths of Elysium. This is going to be a MUD using the evennia project, which we have right here. But before we get into that, I want to just show off what we've done so far. For people who don't know, MUDs are text-based adventure games. So right now, there isn't much to look at, but we can do look and see the room we're in and a description. We're running this on a Raspberry Pi 4, which is a system on a chip that you can find available in kits for under $100. We're using the $100 version for the extra RAM because we're going to use the server for a few different things, but I've seen evennia run on Raspberry Pi 3 as well. When setting up the Raspberry Pi 4, there's a downloader which lets you choose which operating system you want it to boot into. We originally tried Ubuntu Server for this, but we ended up going with the Raspberry Pi OS just because it worked out of the box and all of the Linux commands just worked. There weren't any other packages or other things we needed to download, and that fit our purposes perfectly. When we get another Raspberry Pi 4 into the lab, I want to do a full video where we go through the installation process, but for now, I just want to go through the quick start guide and point out a few of the things I ran into while installing. Since we're going to be installing our build on a Raspberry Pi, I'm going to be going down to the Linux instructions, though I'm usually using Windows or Mac, so I'll try to explain it from that perspective. The first thing you need to do is open up your terminal, which is essentially the command prompt for Linux. And in there you can type python-v, which will show you what Python version you're running, which is important for a few of the steps. Once you know your Python version, you're ready to install a set of packages. If the version of Python is already a version 3 point something, you need to run this set of commands. But if it is defaulting to any of the Python 2 series, you can run this top set of commands here. After you get all of your packages to install, and this is the point we were running into issues with our Ubuntu server distribution, you're ready to create your development folder. But when you're creating this folder, remember that this is not the name of your game, and you don't really want the same name later on in your folder. So they use muddev, development, or anything else would really work there, but essentially this is the directory you're going to be building your game in. The next step is to cd into that folder and then clone that Git repository. This is built into Linux. You'll have to download Git if you're on Windows. Once Git has cloned the evennia repository into your development folder, you're ready to set up your virtual environment. This is an optional step, but it's recommended to keep your environment separate in case you need to install packages or have specific versions for your game, and don't want it to affect the Python running everything else in your system. To set up a virtual environment, it's actually pretty easy now that we have our packages installed, and it's just running virtual env and then giving it a name. This name can be anything, but it is going to be something that will appear in your development folder. This next line here is if you're running a version of Python that is older than 3.7. So essentially, if your system defaults to an older version of Python, you can create your virtual environment to always use the new version of Python you just installed. Once we've created our virtual environment, we need to activate it. So we can type in source, the name of our environment, /bin/activate. And if you notice, that's actually the structure of the directories of the folder just created in your new development folder. Now you should see parentheses with your environment's name in your Python interpreter. And then we're ready to install evennia. We can run pip install -e evennia while you're in your development folder, and it will create all of the evennia game data necessary. Then you actually create your game. This is where you actually create the name of your game, but this is a directory name. And I'll do another video where I show how to create a friendly name if you want to add spaces or characters that aren't allowed in your directory here. When you run this, it'll take a second, and then it'll create a new directory, and you'll see inside your mud dev or your development folder your environment, evennia, and the name of your new game you just created. Then all you have to do on the server is start your game. You cd into your game directory evennia migrate, which will create all of the database structure you need to run the game, and then evennia start. Once it starts, it'll ask you to create a user, which you can use with Connect, and once you're in there, you can actually just open up and create an account in the game itself. The super user is important to keep track of, though, because the first user you create already has all of the God mode commands and everything enabled, and you need that account to enable other people to work on your game. To test your game, on the Raspberry Pi, you can just open up a browser and go to http://localhost:4001, which will open up a client. You'll see a web page to land on where you can create characters and other things, and then you can launch the game. But we still have one thing you need to do before it can be available to the rest of the world. Connecting your game to the outside world requires you to do some port forwarding, and I'm not going to show this specifically in detail because it's really dependent on your router and internet service provider and many other details. But you have to go into the settings and do some port forwarding for ports 4000 through 4005, so people can send commands to your router and the command will be forwarded to the Pi, and that allows you to have that input-output communication required for gameplay. One extra step, which is kind of an optional feature but kind of nice, is to set up Samba on the Raspberry Pi, so you can log in and actually remotely change the Python files and update the game, where you can build stuff in the game, but if you're really wanting to get advanced and change gameplay mechanics, we're really going to need to be digging into the core of evennia. And that pretty much wraps things up for this video. I want to do a quick shout out to both Marshall Kolakethis and Jeremy Mitchell, who are busy building parts of the game, and we'll have more updates soon. As always, there'll be links in the comments and descriptions below, and hope to see you soon. Peace.